1.
Good day, Black Knight scholars. Mr. Deegan in VidNote zone. We're on to 5.3, Unit 5, Lesson 3. It's learning target time. I will understand the political and economic impact of the Civil War and the period after the war called Reconstruction. How does the United States pick up the pieces and rebuild? Reconstruction started in 1865 and ended in 1877. The summary. The Civil War and Reconstruction resulted in Southern resentment meaning bitterness, toward the North and African Americans, and political and economic control of the South returned to whites in the U.S. Temporary gains. The economic and political gains of former slaves proved to be temporary. These are all African Americans who were public officials. They were elected to the Congress in the U.S. right after the Civil War. But 20 years later, they are no longer allowed to be in these positions. Lincoln's views, Part 1. Here is the 16th president. Lincoln said the idea that the U.S. was one indivisible nation had prevailed. The North wins the Civil War and the United States stays together. Lincoln also said since secession, breaking away, was illegal, Confederate governments in the southern states were illegitimate, had no power, and therefore the states had never really left the Union. Lincoln is trying to be a peacemaker here. Lincoln's views, Part 2. Lincoln also said that Reconstruction would quickly restore legitimate southern state governments that were loyal to the Union. Furthermore, Lincoln says that he believed that to reunify the nation, the federal government, with him as the leader, should not punish the South, but, quote, and these are Lincoln's exact words, act with malice, hatred, towards none, with charity for all, to bind up the nation's wounds. The Civil War caused wounds. Lincoln doesn't think it does any good to punish the South. Lincoln's assassination. The assassination of Lincoln, just a few days after Robert E. Lee's surrender at Appomattox, allowed radical Republicans to punish the former Confederate states. Lincoln is not a radical Republican. He's a regular Republican. And here is the assassination. Lincoln is attending a play with his wife. John Wilkes Booth comes up from behind and shoots him in the back of the head. This is 1865, right after the Civil War ends. The Confederate states were not allowed back into the Union immediately, but were put under military occupation after Lincoln dies. Voting rights for African Americans. Radical Republicans also believed in guaranteeing voting rights and other civil rights to African Americans. They fought with Lincoln's successor as president. Here he is, Andrew Johnson, over the issue of civil rights for freed slaves, eventually impeaching him, but they failed to remove him from office. So Andrew Johnson does not want to give rights to African Americans. The radical Republicans do. These radicals try to kick him out of office, but it fails. And this is a sketch that shows the impeachment trial of this man, Johnson. The Civil War amendments. After the war, these 3 Civil War amendments were added to the Constitution. The 13th Amendment, slavery was abolished or stopped permanently in the U.S. We are people, not property. This amendment links to this idea. The 14th Amendment, states were prohibited, banned from denying equal rights under the law to any American. And the 15th Amendment, voting rights were guaranteed regardless of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. In other words, former slaves could now vote. But Reconstruction ends. The Reconstruction period ended following the close presidential election of 1876, and a compromise is struck. The name of the compromise is the Compromise of 1877. And this is a sketch that shows the South and the North compromising, and unfortunately the North is looking sad because all of the progress they made as a result of the Civil War went down the drain. What did this compromise do? The Republicans agreed to end the military occupation of the South. The compromise allowed former Confederates who controlled the Democratic Party to regain power. And the compromise opened the door for the Jim Crow era and began a long period in which African Americans in the South were denied the full rights of American citizenship. African Americans had the right to vote and hold public office, but then it was taken away from them. Economic impact for the South, Part 1. Southern states were left devastated by the war. Farms, railroads, and factories had been destroyed throughout the South. Confederate money was worthless. Many cities, such as Richmond and Atlanta, here is Richmond after the Civil War, lay in ruins, and the South's source of labor changed due to the loss of life during the war and the end of slavery. Economic impact for the South, Part 2. The South would remain an agriculture-based economy, here's a farm, and the poorest section of the U.S. for many decades after the war. We need to remember most of the Civil War was fought in the South, so their economy was ruined. The North, economic impact for the North. The North and Midwest emerged from the war with strong and growing industrial economies, laying the foundation for the sweeping industrialization of the U.S. in the late 1800s and the emergence of the U.S. as a global economic superpower by the beginning of the 1900s. Here's a factory, and here are factory workers. This type of economy was found in the North after the war. The Transcontinental Railroad. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad soon after the war ended intensified the westward movement of settlers into the states between the Mississippi River and the Pacific Ocean. And here you see a picture of a ceremony celebrating the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869. You see someone has a bottle of champagne for celebrating this accomplishment. And you are almost done. Please write 2 summary questions. Think of 2 questions that you'd like to ask about what we have just learned. Write them down. And when you're done with that, you are done with this lesson. Until next time, this is Mr. Deegan reporting live from the VidNote Zone.